Welcome back to the True Crime Collection, where Jen and Brian are diving into the world's most chilling crimes. From unsolved mysteries to dark endeavors, they uncover the stories that will keep you hooked. This is the True Crime Collection.
Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive with us.
Glad to be back.
So today we're going to be looking into one of the most haunting and just fascinating cases in American history, and that is the Manson family murders.
Absolutely. And I think this one's particularly interesting because it continues to fascinate people.
Oh, for sure.
To this day, we're talking 50 years later, and it's still...
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
And we have so much to go over. We have firsthand accounts.
Oh, yeah.
We have trial transcripts, psychological analyses, all sorts of stuff. And it's really going to give us a good insight into just like the dark side of human nature. Like some of the stuff we're going to read today is really chilling.
Oh, for sure.
But, I think it's really important to learn these things.
Absolutely. I think it's really going to open up the conversation to the anxieties that a generation was facing on the brink of some really big changes.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that is so interesting about this story is that it's not just a true crime thriller.
Mm-hmm.
It's really a cultural time capsule.
It is.
It makes us look at the 1960s and realize that, that dream of peace and love that was kind of falling apart.
Yeah, it makes you think, like, was it really all that, or was there something else underneath?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so it's the summer of '69. Picture, like, the sun-drenched streets of L.A., the music scene, everybody's excited for the future. There's this allure of Hollywood, but, bubbling under the surface is this anxiety about the Vietnam War. There's still huge racial tensions.
Absolutely.
And you get this creeping feeling like the counterculture movement is taking a turn.
It's taking a darker turn, yeah.
Yeah, it's not all peace and love anymore.
No.
So this is where our story begins. 1050 Cielo Drive.
Yes.
Nestled in the Hollywood Hills. And you've probably seen pictures of this place, this beautiful Spanish-style mansion.
Yeah.
Just gorgeous. And it was a haven of luxury and exclusivity.
Absolutely.
And it seems like a world away from all the
turmoil.
The turmoil and the problems that are going on in the rest of the world.
Yeah, like you would never think that something bad can happen there.
Exactly. And it was home to Sharon Tate, a rising Hollywood star.
Yeah, she was beautiful.
Gorgeous and full of life.
Yeah.
And she was pregnant at the time.
Yes, very pregnant.
And she was waiting for her husband to get back Roman Polanski, who was working in Europe at the time.
Yes.
And, sadly, her story, her tragic fate is at the heart of this deep dive.
It is. And, her murder, along with the others at Cielo Drive, really became a symbol of this, loss of innocence.
Yeah.
Like we said, there was this feeling that, darkness couldn't touch a place like that.
But it could touch anywhere.
But it can touch anywhere.
And it did.
Yes.
So we can't really talk about Sharon Tate in this case without talking about Charles Manson.
Right.
So he was charismatic.
Oh, yeah, extremely.
But he was also deeply disturbed.
Yes. And he preyed on young people, especially the ones that felt lost and disillusioned in this time of change.
Yeah, like they were looking for something.
Exactly.
And he gave them this idea of belonging.
Yeah, he gave them purpose, a place in his so-called family.
Yeah, it's like a family, but not really.
No, not a healthy one.
Not a healthy family at all. And this is where things get really interesting.
And really disturbing.
Yeah, so Manson wasn't just a charismatic cult leader.
Right, he was so much more than that. He was a master manipulator.
Yeah.
And he was able to tap into the anxieties of that time, like we talked about. And he was able to twist the peace and love ideals into something really sinister.
Yeah.
He created this apocalyptic vision he called Helter Skelter.
Okay, let's unpack Helter Skelter.
Yeah.
Because I think for a lot of people, it's just this vague, scary concept.
Right, and most people probably think that he just made it up.
Yeah.
But he actually got it from the Beatles song.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so he believed that song was actually a prophecy about a race war that was coming.
What?
Yeah. And he thought this war was going to elevate him and his followers to power.
So he's twisting this pop culture phenomenon, this music that like defined a generation.
Yes.
And he's turning it into this weapon
It's crazy.
of
Yeah.
fear and manipulation.
Yeah, and that's a really good point because that gives us a really good insight into his methods.
Yeah.
Like he knew how powerful symbols were, how to tap into people's fears, their anxieties, and he would use this to control his followers and make them think they were part of something bigger, something revolutionary.
Yeah.
But really, it was just his own crazy ideas.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that these people that joined his family weren't all from broken homes or troubled backgrounds.
Exactly.
A lot of them were from middle-class families. They were educated.
Absolutely.
They were drawn to this counterculture movement, but they were also searching for something.
They were searching for meaning. They wanted to belong.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people can relate to that.
I think so, too.
Especially young people.
Yeah, and that's what made Manson so dangerous. He was able to offer them this belonging, this purpose, but it was all disguised as this fight against the establishment, this fight against the evils of society.
Yeah.
But it was all really messed up.
Yeah. So we've got this cultural upheaval. We've got this deeply disturbed leader and this group of followers who have fallen under his spell.
It's scary to think about.
It is. It's a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely. And as we dig deeper into what happened that summer, you'll see how all of these things come together in the most horrible way imaginable.
So we're going to focus on the night of August 8th, 1969, and the events that led up to the murders at Cielo Drive.
Yeah.
This was a night that would change the landscape of Hollywood and leave a mark on American history forever.
Definitely.
So stay tuned for part 2.
It's going to be a wild ride. It's just wild to think about, like, the contrast,
Yeah.
how peaceful it was at Cielo Drive that night, and then just the darkness that was about to come.
It's almost like you can't even picture it.
No, it's really hard.
So you mentioned earlier about how Manson, twisted the Beatles' music for his own purposes.
Yeah.
Did this helter-skelter prophecy, did it specifically target Sharon Tate?
Well, it's hard to say for sure.
Right.
There's no evidence that Manson had, a personal vendetta against Sharon Tate.
Okay.
But the house, 1050 Cielo Drive, that did have some significance for him.
Oh, how so?
So the house used to be rented by this record producer who had actually rejected Manson's music.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and some people think that this rejection fueled Manson's rage. He was so angry about it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so the house kind of became a symbol for him of this Hollywood elite that he just despised.
Yeah.
So you could say that, yeah, maybe the house itself was a target.
Right, and it all ties back into this helter-skelter thing. It's like he's trying to make it real in a way.
Exactly. He's trying to bring about this race war that he believes in.
Wow, so it's like a combination of his ideology, this helter-skelter prophecy, and maybe even a twisted sense of revenge.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it.
It's scary.
It is, and then you think about the people he sent to actually carry out the plan.
Right, the family members.
Yeah, the actual murderers themselves, like Tex Watson's, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, Linda Kasabian.
It's really striking to me that 3 of the 4 people you named are women.
Yeah.
That's not really the traditional image of a violent criminal.
Right, and that's what's so disturbing and also so interesting. From a psychological perspective, these women were, in a lot of ways, just products of their time.
They were looking for meaning and belonging just like the other followers.
Exactly. And Manson saw that he knew how to exploit it. He knew how to twist their vulnerabilities, their desire for acceptance, into something really monstrous.
Mm-hmm.
It's just awful.
So it's August 8th, 1969. The Manson family is approaching Cielo Drive.
What happens? Well, they approach under the cover of darkness, and the first thing they do is cut the phone lines to the house.
Really?
Yeah. So they were isolated. Nobody could call for help.
Wow, that's so chilling.
It's a really calculated move. It shows how much they wanted to control the situation.
Yeah.
And make sure that nobody could escape.
It's like that feeling you get in a horror movie.
Exactly. Something bad is coming.
Yeah, you're trapped.
And even before they get to the main house, they run into Stephen Parent, who was just 18 years old at the time.
Oh, wow.
And he was visiting the property's caretaker.
Mm-hmm.
He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
It's so sad.
It really is. And they just shoot him right there in his car.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. It's a really brutal reminder that this is just random, senseless violence.
And so Stephen Parent becomes the first victim.
Sadly, yes. And it's important to remember that he had no connection to the house or to the people inside.
Just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah. And then the family enters the main house, and that's when the real terror begins.
Okay.
Tex Watson goes in with a gun, and he basically herds Sharon and her guests into the living room.
Okay.
And what happens next is it's really difficult to talk about.
Yeah.
But I think it's important that we do.
Yeah, I agree.
Because it's a huge part of understanding why this case is still so impactful today.
And the lasting legacy of it.
Right. We have to remember the victims.
Absolutely. So we'll approach it with sensitivity, but we do have to talk about the brutality.
Yeah.
So what happened inside that living room?
So it was chaotic. It was terrifying. Sharon was 8.5 months pregnant.
Oh, my God.
And she was pleading for her life and the life of her unborn child.
Wow. I can't even imagine.
Jay Sebring, who was known as a really gentle person, he tried to protect Sharon.
Yeah, of course.
But he was overpowered and murdered.
Jeez.
Wojciech Frykowski fought back. He really tried to survive.
Yeah.
But he was also killed.
Wow.
And Abigail Folger, she managed to escape the house, but they chased her down and murdered her on the front lawn.
It's just chilling how each victim's story adds another layer to this horrific event.
Yeah, it just keeps getting worse and worse.
And the violence wasn't random or anything.
No, it was very personal. It was fueled by this rage that went beyond just killing.
Like they wanted to hurt them.
Yeah, they wanted to torture them.
Yeah.
They wanted to make them suffer. They taunted their victims. They left these messages scrawled in blood on the walls.
What?
Yeah, it's like they were trying to put on a show.
Like a performance.
Yeah, a gruesome one, a terrifying one. And it was all designed to send a message to shock and horrify people.
And it worked?
Oh, absolutely. They got exactly what they wanted. The scene that the police found the next morning was like something out of a nightmare.
Yeah.
The bodies, the blood, the messages on the walls. It was just awful.
It's like this stain on history.
It's a stain that will never go away.
Yeah, it's just hard to even imagine, like, coming across the,
Absolutely.
the brutality and just the sheer horror of it.
And then, like, imagine being there and having that silence be broken by just the media frenzy.
Oh, yeah. The media just exploded with this case.
Oh, it was everywhere.
Yeah.
Newspapers, TV. It was inescapable.
It's like the whole nation became obsessed with this.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And Manson just ate it up.
Oh, he loved the attention.
Oh, yeah. He was giving interviews, making all sorts of crazy pronouncements. He was playing the part.
Like he knew exactly what he was doing.
Oh, absolutely. He was a master manipulator, not just of people, but of the media as well.
Yeah.
He knew how to use it to his advantage.
It's like he became the poster child for the counterculture gone wrong.
Right? Like all the dark and twisted things that were lurking beneath the surface of the hippie movement.
Yeah, and then you had the trial, which I was reading about, and it sounded like just a total circus.
Oh, yeah, it was a media spectacle for sure.
Like beyond even just a regular trial.
Yeah, Manson's behavior was so bizarre, he was pulling all these stunts in the courtroom.
Really?
Yeah, and his followers were outside chanting and protesting. It was wild.
So did they actually get a verdict? Like, was the prosecution able to prove that Manson was behind all of this?
Well, they built their case mainly on the testimony of Linda Kasabian.
Okay, the family member that was at Cielo Drive?
Yeah, but she didn't actually participate in the killings. And her testimony was really chilling. She talked about how controlling Manson was, how obsessed he was with helter-skelter.
Oh, wow.
And that he specifically ordered the murders.
So even though Manson wasn't physically there, he was still convicted.
Exactly. They got him on conspiracy to commit murder.
Wow.
And he was sentenced to death, along with several of his followers, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel.
Gee.
But then later, their sentences were commuted to life in prison when California got rid of the death penalty.
Oh, wow. So he spent the rest of his life in prison.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is, he still had followers.
Really?
Even after all that, even behind bars, people were still loyal to him.
That's so disturbing.
It just shows you the power of manipulation, how deeply he affected these people.
Like he created a whole alternate reality for them.
Yeah, where violence was okay and he was the ultimate authority.
That's scary.
It's a reminder that we have to be careful who we trust and what we believe.
Yeah, for sure. So we've covered a lot today. The lead up to the murders that night, the trial, the convictions. But what about the aftermath?
Right.
Like, how did all of this affect Hollywood and, like, America as a whole?
Well, it was a huge turning point.
Yeah.
It marked the end of an era, the end of that 60s dream of peace and love.
Like the bubble burst.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it created this feeling of fear and paranoia.
Yeah.
Like suddenly nowhere felt safe.
Like that darkness that had been simmering under the surface finally came out.
Yeah, and Hollywood was never the same.
Really?
Yeah, security became a huge thing. People were scared to be out at night. Homes were being fortified.
Yeah.
Gated communities started popping up everywhere.
Wow. So it really did change the landscape.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was this realization that Hollywood wasn't immune to the darkness.
Right.
It could happen anywhere.
And what's really interesting is that people are still fascinated by this case.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Like there's books, movies, documentaries. It's like we can't get enough of it.
I think it's because it taps into something primal.
Yeah. Like our deepest fears.
Yeah, it shows us the dark side of human nature, the potential for violence and manipulation that's within all of us.
Right. And it reminds us that no matter how much we think we've progressed or evolved, that darkness is still there.
It is, and it can come out in the most unexpected ways.
So we started this deep dive by asking why the Manson family case still fascinates and horrifies us.
Yeah.
Now that we've gone through all of it, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's because it's a story without easy answers.
Yeah.
It's about the complexity of human nature, about how easily we can be drawn to charismatic but dangerous people.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder that we have to be vigilant, we have to think critically, question authority, and trust our own gut instincts.
Yeah, and we can't forget the victims of this tragedy.
Absolutely.
We have to remember their lives and strive to create a world where these kinds of things don't happen.
Yeah, we owe it to them to learn from what happened and work towards a better future.
Well said. So thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the Manson family murders. It's been a heavy one, but I think it's a story that needs to be told.
I agree, and I think we all learned something today.
Yeah, for sure. Until next time, everybody.